Welcome to the program today. Mondo Gonzales here in studio with our good friend Josh Peck, and we're going to be talking about the calendar. And here's the question for you is, how close are we? Has there been changes in the calendar? What do we know? When is going to be the end of the age? Stick around and find out.
Psalm 19 tells us, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Introducing the 2026 Psalm 19 calendar, now with new, never-before-seen images from the Prophecy Watchers Observatory. Each month features a vivid glimpse into God's magnificent universe, paired with inspiring scripture that lifts your spirit all year long. Order your copies today and share the beauty of God's amazing universe.
Well, Josh, here we are. Welcome.
Thank you, Mondo. Good to be back.
And you have Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have a 2-volume set, which I want to get into today because there's some interesting timing as it relates to the year 2025. It's been, certainly people have talked about it going a long way back. Even, the late Tom Horn, he's been here with you, and we've done interviews. But your new set here, Unlocking the Final Jubilee of the Church Age, A Scene History and the Prophetic Calendar, as well as Lost Festivals and the Prophetic Timeline. To me, I want to discuss this because as we are transitioning here, 2025 is almost over. And so let's jump in for a minute. These two works, maybe kind of give us an overview, if you don't mind, about why you wrote them, the research you did, how you organized them, and kind of the importance.
So for those not familiar, Dead Sea Scrolls were written and kept by the Essenes. They contain every book of the Bible except for Esther, but that could be because it was just degraded, or we don't know the reason for that. But there's also some extra biblical text in there too, such as Jubilees, Enoch, things like that. Well, within all of those texts, we find this amazing calendar, and it's actually prophetic in nature. So this was the calendar, according to the Essenes, that God gave to Adam on when the sun and moon and stars were created on that day of creation. So they actually start their day of creation on Wednesday. They start their week on Wednesday because of that, their first day of the year. So the prophetic thing about this is not only was this a yearly calendar, but it was a calendar throughout all of human history. So they said that the Essenes believed that the entire calendar human historical time period would model after our 7-day week. So they believed 7,000 years from the time they got their calendar till the time of after the millennium. And then they believed in that last 1,000 years would be the Sabbath, the millennial reign of Christ, as we would call it. Ancient church fathers taught this too. But before the millennium, there would be 3 ages. Each age is 2,000 years. First age was the age of creation. That was from their year 0 to 2000. That ended with right after the Tower of Babel and the Call of Abraham. Then that entered into the age of Torah, another 2,000 years. That ended with right around the destruction of the temple, a couple of years after that. And then it was the age of grace, which we're in now. And they actually called it that. The amazing thing, though, is they believed that would be around 2,000 years. And we're coming up on the last 50 years of that. And that's called a jubilee. So we're coming up to, starting in March of 2026, we will be entering into, according to the Essenes, the final jubilee, the final 50 years of the age of grace.
Yeah, to me, I find it fascinating where if you think about today, what calendar, you go back to the Julian calendar by Julius Caesar, you look at the Gregorian calendar that was created not very long ago and maybe centuries ago. And so you think, well, what does God think about all this? Because when you think about the days of the week that we have, you might have Sunday, the sun, moon day, Monday, and you have all these other days that are in reference to these false gods. They have pagan names, and then our months certainly have pagan names. And you think when you go to Israel today, they just say, oh, hey, I'll see you on the 4th day. I'll see you on the 5th day. They don't use the modern pagan names the way we do. It's just 1, 2, 3. But talk about how we understand the connection between the Essene calendar Again, even the confusion that you might have. So we have the Julian calendar, got the Gregorian calendar, we have the modern Hebrew calendar, the Jewish calendar in Israel, and then you have the Essene calendar. So I mean, that's like, well, okay, how do we wrap our heads around this? Kind of give us some background.
Sure. Well, they even had this back during the time of Christ. There was 2 calendars being used. So national Israel used the Pharisee calendar, which was a lunar calendar. And when you look into the Book of Jubilees, the basic story of that, and other areas too, but the basic story of what happened was, at some point, and in Jubilees it's prophesied that this was going to be a future event, at some point there was going to be some kind of corruption within Israel, and Israel would start following pagan types of things. And they would abandon the original calendar and go for a pagan lunar calendar. Well, we can pretty much very confidently pinpoint that to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, and during that whole time. What it seems like what happened was, when he invaded, or when all that stuff happened, and desecration of the temple, and during all that time, it seems like the deal was, okay, Israel, you can still do some of your Jewish things, but you have to adopt our lunar calendar. And then there was a split. Some of Israel, mainly, national Israel, what became national Israel at the time, they said, okay, we'll do that. We'll take that deal. But there was another group that said, absolutely not. We're not going to do that. God commanded us to go buy this calendar. If we do it wrong, our temple stuff's not going to work. We're going to have priests die and all of this stuff. So they broke off, and they eventually became, there was other splits and other things that happened too. I'm condensing a lot of history down to something really short, but they eventually became what are known as the Essenes, or the people that were in Qumran, and they were doing all their stuff over there and keeping to the original solar calendar. And what's amazing is we weren't able to piece that together until just a few years ago, at least not all of it, until just a few years ago, but now we have it complete. We have the total thing. We can actually follow it today. So a good friend of mine, Dr. Ken Johnson, he actually pulled all this together and developed this online calendar. And so he and I talked, and I said, hey, what if we came together and made a print version of this so people could have it at home? And that's exactly what we did. So this is the print calendar, and the way that this works, it's different than our normal Gregorian calendar. So their year actually begins in mid-March, their new year. So March 18th, according to this calendar, and this is the way it works, people can see that, we have on top the actual Essene calendar with all of their dates, and then on the bottom is our normal Gregorian calendar with, there's St. Patrick's Day there, all our normal like American holidays, but we have all of their festivals and feasts, and they actually had 12 of them as opposed to the 7 that we find in Leviticus. And so you can actually use this calendar, and I've done that in Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I went through everything, like from Genesis to Revelation, to show you can use this calendar for all of it, and it fits perfectly. You can find feast days in Revelation that you might not have known was there. One example that I really like, and I give a lot to just show how cool this is in Revelation when it talks about the 2 witnesses being killed, and then people are celebrating in the streets, and they're giving gifts. And I understand the celebration, but I never understood the gift-giving thing. Like, I'm old enough to remember when Osama bin Laden was killed, and everybody celebrated, but it wasn't Christmas. We didn't, give gifts to each other. Well, come to find out, when you map it out on this calendar, that happens during Purim, which is a Jewish celebration where they do celebrate in the streets and they do give gifts. So that's just one of those little things that you can use this calendar to find out. But there's lots of prophetic stuff in there that I put in the book and that you can find in this calendar.
Yeah, to me, it's pretty fascinating when you think about all the different things that God cares about. You go back to Exodus chapter 12 at the beginning of Passover as they were getting ready to leave, and he says, this is the beginning of months for you. And so right there, right out of the gate, God is 100% establishing this calendar system to Moses, which had probably been lost, living in Egypt and other things. But he's wanting them, as this new nation is going to be established, he wants them to follow his specific calendar. So to me, I find it very fascinating. We're going to take a little break here where you can see how to get our magazine, which again goes to 20,000 people per month. Josh writes for it, I write for it, others. All the latest things that are happening in our world, covering prophetic trends. So take a listen.
At Prophecy Watchers, we believe that God has called us to be a voice in these last days, to warn you of things to come, to educate you on the study of Bible prophecy, and to boldly proclaim the soon return of Jesus. For your gift of just $50 or more, here's what we'd love to send you. 12 monthly issues of our 4-color magazine, The Prophecy Watcher, in your choice of print or digital. Plus 5 bonus DVDs packed with eye-opening teachings from prophecy experts, including The Mystery of the Rapture, The Great Apostasy and the Revealing of the Antichrist, Holy Fire in Jerusalem, new shocking discoveries surrounding the Shroud of Turin, The Stones Cry Out, the archaeological evidence for Jesus, The Mystery of the 10 Kings. Could these be the wealthy and influential oligarchs who control our world today? As an added bonus, we want to send you a one-of-a-kind prophetic treasure, a book that examines every prophecy in the entire Bible. Exploring Bible prophecy from Genesis to Revelation is the work of 2 prophecy legends, Tim LaHaye and Ed Hindson. It's a book you'll find on the shelf of every prophecy expert. This 560-page masterpiece is our bonus gift to you. This $120 value can be yours for your gift of $50 with shipping included in the USA. Call us at the number on your screen or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees do apply and all prices listed are in US dollars. The signs are everywhere. The prophetic puzzle is almost complete, and yet so many are still asleep. That's why the Prophecy Watchers exists, to shine a light in the darkness and help believers understand the lateness of the hour. We believe Jesus is coming soon, and your support helps us take this urgent message to the ends of the earth.
Well, welcome back. We are talking to Josh Peck again about his 2-volume set, Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, as well as trying to understand what God has done with the calendar and understand the jubilees and different things. So you mentioned that earlier. I want to go back to that because, you know, the calendar being set up in these 2,000 year, you know, at least there, 2,000 ages, and then you have other sections. And then, of course, we know in the Bible, we talk about Jubilee every 50 years for those that read the Old Testament. But you mentioned that we're entering in 2025, this last 50-year period. And so that people are going to wonder, well, wait, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, do we have 50 years to wait? Because, so let's talk about that. And let's also talk about the last 2,000-year period.
Yep.
Because the last 2,000-year period of the Torah ended in 75 AD.
Technically 76, but
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. And so yeah, and I don't want people to freak out. I'm not saying that we have to wait 50 years for the rapture or for the return of Christ or anything like that. All it means is that by that time, by 2076, everything, if the Essene calendar is correct, if we're understanding it correctly, everything should be in place for the millennial kingdom to begin, for that age to begin. That doesn't mean that that's exactly when the return of Christ is going to happen or when the rapture is going to happen. The calendar doesn't give us dates on those things. But what it means is just everything should be in place. So it's a great thing to bring up the age of Torah because I think that gives us a really good model on how this might work. And I say might because and I go through it in the book, there's several different ways that this could work. So the age of Torah, their final jubilee would have been between the years on our calendar, 26 and 76 AD. And the final real major thing, there was a couple other events that happened after, but the real major thing that happened near the end was the destruction of the temple. So once that happened, a couple of years after that, a few years after that, the sacrificial system was officially done away with, and the Pharisees basically became, this is reducing it down a bit, but the Pharisees basically became like what we would consider like Jewish, it became rabbinic Judaism, what we would consider that today. So that switch happened. So we entered into the age of grace. Now that doesn't mean that people couldn't get saved before or anything like that, because and think about it like this: we would say that the church age began probably with the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. That's what most Christians would believe. Well, if we go based on the calendar, that happened right around 32, 33 AD, somewhere around there, somewhere in that range.
Early on in that final
Very
jubilee.
early on. So that was only a few years after 26 AD. So the idea might be, it could be, and I'm not saying that this is exactly it, but Jesus fulfilled his earthly mission very early on in the final jubilee of the Torah age, very, very early on. Is it possible that he might fulfill everything having to do with his return early on in the final year of our jubilee? And that could be, but then you would wonder, well, wouldn't there be a big gap of time then between, when Jesus returns and the start of the millennium? And yeah, because it could be that he returns. What else needs to be done? We know that in the end of Ezekiel, there's this amazing temple, there's this amazing city. That's going to take time to build. And interestingly enough, Herod's temple, by all sources that I could find, it said it took about 40 years. So, and I don't believe that Jesus is going to come back, snap his fingers, and there's just going to be a city and temple there. I think it's actually going to have to be built. That could take time. So the idea is that once that, what would that be, 3076 date comes around, everything should be in place for the millennium to start, which means the city will already have to be there, the temple will already have to be there. That doesn't happen during the tribulation. There is a third temple. The fourth temple could be a cleansed version, it could be a destroyed and rebuilt version of the temple, but that city doesn't, as far as I can tell, does not get built during the tribulation. That's sometime after. So there could be a gap between the return of Jesus and the end of this final jubilee. So again, I cannot emphasize enough, because I'm misunderstood on this all the time. I am not saying that we have to wait till 2076 for the rapture or for the return of Christ or anything. The calendar doesn't tell us that. The rapture could happen anytime, and the return of Christ could happen anytime 7 years from now, from any given moment. So it doesn't give us specific dates like that, but we do have this time frame to work with. So that's just one of many ways that I present in the book on how all this could work out, where you can still have a pretty early rapture and tribulation in the Jubilee, in our final Jubilee, but still have to wait a few years till the millennium can actually finally begin.
Yeah, to me, it's pretty fascinating when you look at, again, the model or the pattern. To me, that's very helpful. One of the things that you talk about as well in the book, which is, it's fascinating when the Dead Sea Scrolls, were discovered in the 40s, late 40s and 50s. It opened up a whole new world. I remember taking a class in seminary on basically the Dead Sea Scrolls, and there's probably been nothing greater in the last couple centuries. And people say the greatest archaeological find ever has been the Dead Sea Scrolls, because of what it has opened up for biblical studies and just especially the Gospels, etc. And you have a chapter in the book on Dead Sea Scrolls and the New Testament as it relates to even some of the language that the Essenes used and other things. I mean, they loved Isaiah 40. They were out in the wilderness. I mean, it's just, to me, it's fascinating. How do the Dead Sea Scrolls contribute to understanding of the New Testament?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, most importantly, they don't change anything. They don't change anything that we're told in the New Testament. What they do, though, is they add a lot of context, which helps out a lot. So when we get language throughout the New Testament about like the end of the age, well, what do they mean by age? And it's interesting because they were nearing their end of the age of Torah, and the Essenes believed that, not necessarily the Sadducees or Pharisees. The Essenes believed that. So the end of their age would be the end of the age of Torah, which was set to end roughly 50 years from that time. But then there's also end time prophecies that talk about the end of the age, meaning our age before the millennium. So that helps us kind of parse those out and figure out what's exactly being talked about. But there's a lot of language about, the sons of light and the sons of darkness. That's all over the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's very Essene writing. And one of the biggest things, probably the biggest thing in this whole understanding of the Essenes versus, New Testament and how that informs us as Christians, is that actually the Essene way, when you look through the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I give several examples throughout the book, they were very much in line with what we would consider Christianity. This would have just been pre-Christ Christianity. And so, they didn't know everything. They still had to be taught some things. But it's very consistent with that. What's amazing is they had these prophecies. They knew the temple was going to be destroyed. They knew once Jesus was killed, resurrected, they knew it was time to leave. They left behind some of their texts that we were able to find, and I believe were preserved for our time because it's the last days. Even Enoch says that That the book of Enoch says that text is for the people that are going to be living during that time, during the end days. And coincidentally enough, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered when Israel was becoming a nation again, right at that same time. But the amazing thing is, well, there's this mystery in academia, like what happened to the Essenes? Where'd they go? Why'd they leave? And the idea mostly is that they just fled because of the temple stuff. But no, what happened was the Great Commission. Jesus told these new converts, mostly Essenes, go out, make disciples of all nations. And they did. We come from that. So we actually come from the Essenes, we as Christians. We're the benefactors of their amazing work and many times their sacrifice and their martyrdom. And to me, so we as Christians have this direct connection to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And again, I want to emphasize, I don't look at these as inspired scripture or anything. I look at it as history. But I don't look at it, I look at it as something that we can learn from, but it's not necessarily, it's not to the same level as the Bible. So if there ever were a contradiction, I haven't found one, but if there ever was one between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Bible, we would go with the Bible. But anyway, so those are just a few of the things on how it connects with us as Christians today, the New Testament, and the whole thing.
Yeah, I find it extremely fascinating in the sense of how the Essenes have and the Dead Sea Scrolls have contributed to our understanding of the Gospels. The other interesting thing too is that the Essenes aren't specifically mentioned by name in the New Testament. We read about them in Josephus, which you're like, oh, who is this other group? I mean, and that Josephus has been around for a long time. But to see this other Essene group that was out in the desert being written about, and people are going, yeah, and in many ways there was some skepticism about that until the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And then you have, again, their literature and other things written to each other. I find it very fascinating. But we're going to take a little break here where you can see how to get Josh's book and certainly the calendar as well. There's so much information. It's something that we can't even fully touch in a short program. But take a listen.
A divine miracle shook the archaeological world in 1947 when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the caves of Qumran. A young shepherd boy was throwing rocks into the caves when he heard the sound of breaking pottery. What he discovered would prove that the Bible we hold in our hands today has not been changed over the last 2,000 years, giving us a new appreciation for the Jewish scribes and the Essenes, who painstakingly copied the scriptures for our benefit. Secreted away in these caves were scrolls that contained 38 of the Old Testament's 39 books. The most spectacular discovery was a well-preserved copy of the Isaiah scroll, which contained all 66 chapters of the book of Isaiah, an important book that highlights the qualifications of the Jewish Messiah. Ironically, just 1 year later, Israel was regathered in their ancient homeland, one of the great miracles of modern history. Working together with Ken Johnson, Josh crafted the Essene calendar, the original calendar that God gave to Adam. Over the centuries, this God-ordained calendar was corrupted by Jewish rabbis, with many believing there was a hidden agenda in play, a conspiracy to hide the prophetic qualifications of Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. The Essenes knew when the Messiah was scheduled to arrive. They knew he would be God in human flesh and that he'd be killed to take on the sins of the world. And shockingly, they seemed to know the day when God's calendar comes to a close and the 1,000-year millennium begins. This unique, one-of-a-kind calendar can be yours for your gift of $25 or more, with shipping included in the USA. Call our toll-free number 24/7 or visit us online at prophecywatchers.tv. For our international friends, please note that additional shipping fees do apply and all prices listed are in US dollars. From Jubilee cycles to Shemitah cycles and a deep dive into the Jewish feast days, no stone is left unturned. Amazingly, the scrolls tell us that there weren't just 7 Jewish feast days, there were 12. Josh even shares his thoughts on the mysterious disappearance of the Essenes in his 2 books that total almost 800 pages. Forgotten Prophecies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Book 1 and 2, may represent the most comprehensive studies ever done on the Essenes and their controversial calendar, which has us all wondering, will Jesus return in our lifetime? Get your own personal copies of these 2 books for your gift of $60 or more, and as always, shipping is included in the USA. When you place your order, we'll include a special bonus, a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar that you've heard about today. Call us toll-free at the number you see on your screen and ask about the Forgotten Prophecies Calendar package. We invite you to partner with us so we can keep our television program coming into homes all over the world, including almost 2 million homes in Israel. Most of all, we want to introduce the Jewish people to their Messiah, Jesus Christ.
Well, welcome back. We are here with Josh Beck, and Josh, some of the things that comes up often is, and this is a question that when you look at Jewish studies, I think I've told you before, my undergrad's in Jewish studies, and so you're like, okay, but it brings up the question, as Christians, there's these Jewish festivals, the feasts of the Lord, and Leviticus 23, there's other festivals. What's the connection? Does God require New Testament Christians to be following and obeying these festivals? And if not, then what's their significance for it?
Right. Well, the main thing is no, we're not required to follow any of these. Even during the time of Torah. So again, the Essenes there were specific ages. There was an age of Torah, and it's different than the age of grace. Even during the age of Torah, though, there were certain festivals, there were certain practices that even Gentile converts that were living in Israel were not allowed to participate in. But anyway, but all of that's done away with anyway because we are now in the age of grace. So the importance of this, it's not that we, look at these festivals, okay, unleavened bread, all of this stuff. We have to learn how to do all this. We need to, figure out our own sacrifices and all that. We don't participate in any of that. The significance is, we have our own versions of things. Of course, there's Passover, things like that. But the significance is, okay, this is what they believed, and these specific festivals were important prophetically because they pointed towards something. What are those things that they point towards? And of course, during that time, God did have his people follow these and practice these to really get it in their heads. So we get to benefit from that, and we get to look at all these festivals and figure out what did they do, what were their practices, the counting of the Omer, what is that, what's mid-spring, and we get to, and I do talk about all that in the books, but we get to benefit from that because we can look forward prophetically and say, okay, what do these specific things mean? What was it pointing to? And of course, all of them point to Christ, but there's different areas. And so I think I want to make that really, really clear that this calendar is not like a guide for how Christians should be living their lives. Yeah. Jesus teaches that in the New Testament. This is more of a tool to not only learn history, but also learn prophecy.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, always good, always good. It reminds me of Colossians chapter 2, 16 to 17, where Paul is making that exact statement, that the festivals, the Sabbaths, the new moons are a shadow, but the substance is of Christ. And so all of these things point to his work on the cross, which again is why we're here. I appreciate what Josh said, that this isn't required for us to follow, but it is helpful for us to learn and see how it points to the gospel, which is why we're here. Jesus died for our sins. He was resurrected. He died on Passover, was resurrected on the Feast of First Fruits. The church began on the Feast of Pentecost. All these point to the work that God has done on our behalf. Why? So we can be saved from our sins. And as always, that's why we're here. We want to share the gospel as well as touch some of these other fun items. But appreciate your prayers for the ministry here and your support. Couldn't do it without you. And appreciate you watching this week. We'll catch you next time.